Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Decker Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. We are glad to join you in Parashat Emor, but before we start, we want to take note of the passing of really one of the leading figures in the conservative movement, one of the leading rabbis, I would say, in America. It's difficult really to how to categorize this, what the headline is. I'm talking about Rabbi Harold Kushner. I have only one book here of him in the screen, Who Needs God by Harold Kushner, but he's actually more famous for When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Which often is misquoted. Because most people think it's why bad things happen to good people.
Indeed. So we're just want to give
exactly the opposite, because the book says that there are certain things you can't really. There's certain questions that are just not, questions. They're not questions you can answer. When bad things happen, we have to respond to tragedy. Why bad things? We can't explain why, but we can explain how to respond when.
So very, very good point, and that is, I think, one of the great misunderstandings of his book and one of the misunderstandings of him as a person. I just want to say, I can recall maybe once or twice hearing him at a convention or in a lecture or whatever, and certainly, seeing videos of him and hearing him on the radio, and really a wonderful, thoughtful, good, decent human being, and who had, I think, this combination of horrible personal tragedy in the loss of his son, and also this, he seized a moment, and where I would give, the appreciation that I want to offer here is that he was able to communicate and articulate his own personal anguish, and make it and bring it to the mainstream of American society. And also, I would even go so far as saying there's a Kiddush Hashem in him, because he gave Jews and Judaism, he gave Torah, and he gave God even a good name. And I think he deserves our respect and our appreciation. I know he received so much criticism within and certainly outside of the conservative movement. Many people, in Orthodoxy had nothing but scorn for him and saw him as naive, and of course it's because they never really read his books, and because he had lots to say about suffering, and he had lots to say about life also, and he was articulate and good. And I said in my class earlier this week, I said, the reason why he received that scorn is because they were just jealous. They were jealous. He sold millions and millions of books, and he made lots of money, and he would trade that all in a second for having his son back. And I see in him, I saw and read him and see the personal anguish in him, and appreciated this extraordinary gift that he had, and an extraordinary gift that he gave to people.
So he had an important lesson, an essential lesson, and that is that we can't explain, but we can comfort.
Yeah.
And too many people get bogged down wanting to know why something happens, which they can't answer. And what Kushner said is, what you can do is comfort that person by being present for that person, and that's something that anyone can do.
Yes.
Barry, when you said they often remember the title of the book wrong, I thought you were going to say something a little bit different, which is that people think that the title is When Good Things Happen to Bad People. How come that happens? What good things happen to bad people? That stinks, man. But Kushner, you have the classic problem of what's called theodicy, justifying God's ways to man, or in Hebrew, tzaddik viralo, a righteous person who suffers. That's just always going to be true, no matter what. Every single life has suffering. Every single life has pain, and the spiritual challenge is to say to life, to live life, to say why life is good, and even I'm a religious person, even to love your life, to love God, even despite your own pain. And you only have a few answers, right? You can only say, like the classical problem is, God can't be all good, all knowing, and all powerful. If God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, then nothing bad should happen. But bad things do happen. And so you only have a limited number of responses that you can say, and Kushner doubles down on the one that I do think is most attested in Jewish tradition, especially most attested in the Kabbalah, even though he was no Kabbalist, that God is actually not all powerful. God is infinitely loving and infinitely good, but much of the world is turned over to randomness, and much of the world is turned over to human free will. And so God doesn't fix every problem. And to me, that is resonant. But you can also understand why, like Orthodox people, they don't want to say God's not all powerful. Why would I want to worship a God who's not all powerful? But if you don't say that, then you really have lots of problems. You have tsunami problems, you have Holocaust problems, you have AIDS problems, you have schizophrenia problems. Why do these things happen?
Sure.
I prefer to say that much of it is turned over to human free will. Some of it is turned over to randomness. There is still a cosmic order, but it doesn't fix every problem. And to live in that space where God is infinitely loving and finitely powerful totally speaks to me as a parent.
Yeah.
Like that's how I feel as a parent. I'm infinitely loving, but I'm finitely powerful.
So I think what he's doing, he's doing a theology in a very personal way. I'll give you a Kushner. I never heard him say this, but I think of Kushner when I think about Psalm 121. Esa Einai El Harim. I look up to the mountains, and what is the source of my help? Ezri me'im Hashem. My help, my strength comes from God. And whenever I teach that psalm, I say we make the mistake of thinking that it's a monologue. It's a dialogue. It's Esa Einai. I'm helpless. And the person standing next to me says, Ezri me'im Hashem, which means my help comes from God, and I'm going to help you. Right? I'm going to guide you along. And so these are two people walking in the valley, and that's what he is. And I think that when bad things happen, the book is his saying, look, I was scarred by life. I was deeply wounded by this terrible, terrible tragedy. And I'm going to remake my life and reach my hands to people who suffer like everyone, because everyone is going to lose in life. And I'm just going to give you the embrace, and I'm going to give you some wisdom, and reject it, accept, I'm just here. I'm a voice. And I think, again, to his credit, there was a great humility about him, and that he understood his celebrity within the cultural moment of America. I mean, he'd been on Oprah and all that. And, there's a certain kind of person that sees that all as frivolous. But he understood that it was important to speak to people, and if that was an audience to be, to speak to, great. He'd go home afterwards and sit at a baseball game, whatever. So, and anyway,
I just wanted to add one piece to the difference between the monologue and the dialogue. And one of the difficulties for people in pain is that it prevents them from hearing, and so we become consumed with our own voice, and we don't listen for a response that might be there if we could only open our ears.
Are you saying about the person in pain, or the person trying to comfort the pain?
The person in pain. Sometimes the pain is so great that we no longer hear what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? So you said that the psalm was a dialogue. So if God is speaking, we have to hear God's voice. Otherwise, God might as well be silent. But if our pain is so great, we might not be able to hear it.
But I think Elliot's saying there's a second person. The one who says, Ezri me'im Hashem, is not God. It's your fellow human being.
It's Harold Kushner. Harold Kushner is walking beside me when I'm in trouble. And he's saying, look, I came to a sense of feeling protected after being battered by life. And I'm here for you. That's what the book meant to me. That's what the book, what his voice means. And I think, I'll put it, he was a voice in American Judaism, and he was a voice in American culture that broke through. And for that, tavo alav bracha, may his memory be a blessing. Because I think he gave a lot of people comfort, and he opened the pathway back to an accessible dialogue, an accessible faith for people, a life of faith. People are comforted by religious life, and people have been so tortured and wounded by their various faith traditions, including ours. And he gave people an entry back, and I think that was remarkable about him. And he was, again, a very, very humble person. Okay, Emor. Speaking about important people, we have a whole parsha dealing with rules relating to Kohanim. Kohanim have to guard who they have their relationships with, who they marry, who they can mourn, and all that. And there are certain restrictions about who can serve as a Kohen. I don't want to go into it in too much depth, except for to say that I want a tour guide in this world. I want, if I was putting on the virtual reality goggles, okay, and I was going into the world of the temple, and I wanted a madrich, someone to say, what's happening here, and you were that madrich, okay? So I'm going to put you on the spot, Jeremy, and say, what's this world about? What kind of zone am I in where these people are restricted? There's a certain kind of uniformity to their bodies, to their behavior. What would be your best guidance on that in my virtual reality world?
Virtual reality world. Well, so with the you like to show also those temple videos and
yeah
sort of animated things. The high priest, the priests, not the high priest who had a very ornate garment, but the priests basically wore white linen, and linen doesn't really take dye. Okay, so linen is always going to be a kind of off-white. They're wearing white clothing, and the truth is that they're working in a slaughterhouse. so there's actually everybody in quote unquote real life, which we have no access to, is actually spattered with blood, and there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. Priest's main job, one of the main jobs, is after the animal is the throat is slit, they collect the blood in a basin, which is a rounded bottom, not a flat bottom, so you can't put it down, and then you splash the blood against the altar. It must have been a total, it must have been somewhat gross. I mean, you know what it looks like even in just a butcher shop, which is not the slaughtering thing. Those white aprons, they're completely, they're immaculate. They're not immaculate. So that's what the quote unquote reality that we're operating within, and what the Torah describes about these people is a kind of physical perfection. There are certain things about the physical perfection that rub modern people distinctly wrong. We, I think, in the 21st century, are suspicious of quote unquote purity. We're suspicious of quote unquote perfection. We love, everybody's favorite line from the Montreal poet, Mr. Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's contemporary spirituality. Ancient spirituality, I think, in a world that was much scarier, much more broken. Every one of us has a dentist to fix our teeth. They had teeth falling out, right? Every one of us has had physicians to heal us when our bodies break. They had like a lot of missing limbs and broken limbs, and people were, generally speaking, like it was hard. And the Kohanim are supposed to be a kind of avatar of like the order. When things, this world is so disordered, look at the priests. They testify to order. Their physical bodies are unblemished. The animals are unblemished. A thing that I think would particularly ring wrong to contemporary ears, that they're not supposed to marry, male Kohanim are not supposed to marry divorced females. The high priest is only supposed to marry a never before married female. Like, they have to have this kind of perfection in a way that implies something a little nasty about the rest of the world. But what I think is going on is that claim for perfection is, man, this world is often broken, and what ritual and religion wants to exemplify is something beautiful and something orderly amidst all this disorder.
Okay, I would press the point a little further and remind us that the Kohen represents God. And when we look at the Kohen, we're supposed to see an image of God. And that's, I think, where the quest for perfection comes from. We were talking about Rabbi Kushner before. He presents a different image of God, a broken God, a God who is not all powerful. So these images of the perfect Kohen no longer match our sense of God. And that's why I think we ultimately reject them in some way.
It's
But in
interesting.
the ancient world, this was part of their projection of God rather than a rejection.
So I wonder, if having described the world, the perfect world and the perfect body, if on this virtual reality tour, ordinary Israelites would not have envy towards the Kohanim. And Jeremy, you are a Kohen, and we've talked about this before. So that does allow you certain privileges. One of which, the most important to which for you, I from our conversations is offering blessings, the Birkat Kohanim, and I know that you don't take that lightly. I think you take it very seriously. I think it resonates deeply with you, and it's so that's a privilege. So I want to say, as an Israelite, on the one hand, I don't know if I envy you for that. I certainly admire that aspect of you, that I kind of like the fact that I have you as part of a group of people that are still acting with that vestige of something beyond explanation. And your experience of it, just remind us,
mystery quality. Yeah, mystery quality is definitely part of religion, and if it all becomes, in the 19th century, they were also modern. They were also suspicious. Not all, obviously, but Western European, Middle European, German. One of the things were rational, and they were very suspicious of all of the pre-modern, mystical something. But I think religion needs and profits from and should yes, there are mysterious powers with things we feel, things we touch that we don't necessarily understand, and the Kohanic, that power of blessing. When you say Birkat Kohanim in Israel, we do this every day in most places, and outside of Israel on the high holidays and on Shosh Regalim in most Orthodox synagogues. Most of conservative synagogues don't do it at all.
We do.
That's because they don't have services on those days.
Oh, we're very proud of the fact that we do Birkat Kohanim in the shul, and I get asked from time to time, why do we do it, and whatever, and I say because.
Well, I remember being in the seminary synagogue. Rabbi Gilman loved to do.
Rabbi Gilman loved doing it.
But what I wanted to point out that the priestly blessing also lends itself to misinterpretation, because it's not the Kohen who's blessing us; he is the medium for God's blessing.
Okay,
and that's also important to keep in mind as well.
Well, it's actually a both, because it says it's Ko tivarchu et bnei Israel. This is how you should bless. And then it says, "V'samu et shmi al bnei Israel v'ani avarchem," and you'll place my name on them and I'll bless them. So it is a cooperative thing, and that's actually how I feel about it. Is that I really do feel like a vessel, and I try to sum it up. The Zohar says you have to love to give a blessing. The blesser has to love, and the recipient has to receive in love. And so that's what I'm really thinking about. I'm thinking about my Ahavat Yisrael, which is what makes me the vessel, my love for the Jewish people, which makes me a reasonable vessel to pass this blessing on. So yeah, like the blessing is fabulous.
Okay, moving to chapter 23 in Vayikra. This chapter is familiar to us because we read it on all the Moadim, at least 3 times a year. This is the Ele Moadei Adonai passage. These are the holidays of God, Mikra'e Kodesh. And, aside from just noting that we have a calendar here and that the calendar encodes in it these points of contact between the people and God, and that they, a holy people not conducts itself in its holy life, as we saw last week with Achremot and Kodoshim, the ethical life and its structure of law. We see the strata of the holy society in the Kohanim, and we saw earlier on in the book of Vayikra the holy behaviors in the sacred zones, and now we have holy time, Moadei Adonai Mikra'e Kodesh, and that ought to tell us, that sometimes some periods of the year, some days of the year are just that much more special. That's pretty well known to us. Let's we happen to find ourselves in Sefirat Ha'Omer now, and every night we're blessing the counting of the Omer, and the verse for that is found in this parsha. Usfartem lachem imacharat haShabbat miyom aviachem et Omer tnufa. You are to count from the after of the Shabbat, from the day that you bring the Omer offering, 7 full weeks that you should count. And can we can you talk about the experience of counting the Omer for a second? Just give me. I'm going to turn to you, Jeremy. Give me your best spiritual meditation on the Omer.
Every day you're walking from Egypt to Sinai.
Beautiful.
Shavuot is about receiving the Torah. I mean, it's the pair of this holiday are so great, and the experience of the American Jewish community. Everybody celebrates Passover to one degree or another, and Shavuot is a little bit of the stepchild about the holidays, but they only make sense if they are a pair. Like you get freedom as the philosopher Isaiah Berlin said, there's positive liberty and negative liberty. Negative liberty, you got to be free from. Positive liberty, you got to be free to. You got to be free to accomplish something. Passover, freedom from. Shavuot, freedom to. And you got to grow in your strength. You got to count your way, to prepare your way, to get ready to receive the Torah, so you figure out what you have freedom to become, freedom to accomplish. We are recording this.
Yes.
At the very end of the 4th week of the Omer. Today happens to be the number.
Well, we counted yesterday 27. That's how you.
I like to do it by athlete's number. This is Mike Trout of the Angels.
Oh my God! There's someone in my show that wants to get a poster. Put all your favorite numbers, like 4, Bobby Orr.
Yes, every day I say.
4 is actually Lou Gehrig, but that's okay.
Every day I say something like that. 27 is Mike Trout. Is David Ortiz of the Red Sox was, and Vladimir Guerrero also of the Angels, and
Ray Jean Houle was 28, I think.
Was he on Les Abs? Was he on?
Yeah, no, I think it was. When was Larry Robinson?
Is Toronto still in it this year?
I think it's still. Yes.
No, they won their first round.
Oh, so we gotta be happy for our friend David Wise if Toronto could
David
win.
Wise, yeah. Okay. All right. So Barry, give me your.
Yeah. So I look at the counting of the Omer as the reclamation of the broken world in which we live, because the point of the Exodus was to get to the promised land. In reality, that was achieved and then lost. And so now, as Jeremy said, we count to Sinai, because Sinai is always with us if we open ourselves to it.
You guys are so deep. I just think about
counting. But wait a minute. So, it didn't really occur to me. I mean, that was duh, but yes, you have to get to the promised land. But I don't really think of Ma'amad Har Sinai and Revelation as being I suppose I should think of it as the step on the way to the promised land, as opposed to an end in and of itself. I described it as a pair that is an end in and of itself. But you drive me to say, well, actually, and this is not a bad thing, especially in the given moment here in 2023 with so many problems in the state of Israel, to say, actually, it's really important. Shavuot happens in exile. It happens in Mount Sinai, not in the promised land, and revelation has to befit you to live in the dangerous, difficult, messed up world of exile.
You guys are so lofty here. I'm thinking like today is 27, and you know what?
So you're still counting.
I'm still counting, and I'm
So
still.
I lost it the second night, which was Shabbos, so I davened early so we could eat. And then, of course, I forgot to say the blessing.
So you know there's still lenient opinions that you can say it, but
I know.
Well, I count without the blessing.
okay,
But
so
it's
fine.
not the same. It's not the same.
Not the same. So counting, it's about counting, and you know that to me is the mystery. The mystery, moneh, mispar lakochavim. You know, limnot.
Well, one way in which we make things count is by counting them.
Exactly. Limnot yameinu keno. You know, teach us to number our days, so that we may attain a heart of wisdom. You know, and you know, we marked time. I you know, last week celebrated my mother's 90th birthday. I'm going to mention it today. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of days, you know.
Yeah.
and you know, we all have zones within the year that are transformative. I think, you know, what's interesting to me about this period is that it is transformational in all the sense that you describe, both of you describe. And that we have a couple of these during the year, the Elul to Yom Kippur. There's also 40 days there. 40 days seems to be a transitional time. You can make a difference in your life in 40 days. A habit can be reinforced in 40 days. You know, people who go on diets and change their behavior, you know, having you know, do exercise regimens and other things. I find, parenthetically, you know, the Jewish year is a highly disruptive year to ordered routines, right? You know, we're literally 27 days after Passover, and I'm just like now getting back to certain things. You know, it takes a few days to put away the dishes and and all of a sudden now and then there's another disruption, and then the same thing happens with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It's like those are this and the whole Chagei Tishrei zone. They're joyful times, but they're highly disruptive to if you want to do stuff regularly and routine.
If you want to have a life, it's a problem.
It's a problem. Moadei Adonai. Okay. Well, we have to talk about the last paragraph of the Parsha, because it deals with a very light topic, right? You know, well, before that, there's this episode of the one who curses. Vayitze ben isha Yisraelit vu ben isha yitoch mis vaykalel. He vaykov ben isha Yisraelit at Hashem. The person who curses God's name and then he is executed for that. Not a small story. And then we get the reiteration of the code of what you should, you know, the lex talionis code. A person who slays another, an animal. Sorry, a person who slays another human being shall be put to death. So this is.
And then the next one is the animal. The
next
verse.
Sorry, yeah, of course. So we were talking prior to recording about the case now being brought to trial in Pittsburgh. You know, our one of our colleagues, you know, classmates, Rabbi Jonathan Perlman, is a rabbi there. His wife published an article in the New York Times, an anguish plea, understanding that this could be a death penalty case, and iterating for us, you know, a kind of difficulty with this as a death penalty case. And so, you know, we don't have a lot of time to wade into this, but I using Harold Kushner as the cue here, let me state as follows. This is anguishing. There's anguish in bringing the case to trial. There's anguish to knowing that there's no other penalty that could pay the price of taking a life than losing your life. And there's anguish in knowing that we somehow can't bring ourselves to do that, both as individuals and as a society, and that it's deeply problematic. And so we live in the place where all of these things really coalesce, that this horrible, horrible murder, the wrecking and ruining of all these innocent lives, the necessity for judgment and strict judgment and life for life, and that as the theoretical outcome, and the impossibility of being an executioner that I think we all share here. And so I only can approach that with the sense of anguish, a sense of anguish that the people sitting in the courtroom have anguish. There's never going to be, even if they took the person out and execute him, is that satisfying? I don't know. And so
well, it's certainly satisfying for some people. It wasn't
Okay,
satisfying for Beth Kislev. And I think ultimately for society, it's not satisfying, because in the sense it puts the problem behind us. And one of the things that I think is important as I get older, appreciate the need for keeping things alive, for not thinking that there is a resolution for these things. And, the lives that were affected on that day in Pittsburgh remain broken. There is no replacement for the lives that are lost.
Right.
And taking the life of the murderer does not bring comfort to those people.
But I would say, what I would say about this, first of all, I think for lots of reasons, judicial death penalty is a bad thing. We talked before we started recording about the possibility of human error. So many people have been freed, they've been convicted of a death penalty crime, they're on death row, and then new evidence, especially DNA evidence, comes to light, and we learn that their convictions were in error. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people, we could look up the number, have been exonerated after capital convictions, and then that's not even to think about corruption, which is also a thing. People can be bribed in cases like that. But Torah has a rule that if there is a death penalty case for a murderer, there's lo tikach kofer, the victim's family cannot accept a monetary payment. In the Code of Hammurabi, actually, there is exactly that. You can accept a monetary payment. And in the Torah, there's no kofer, there's no monetary payment. It has to be life for life. And the Rambam writes about this because the life that is taken does not belong to the victim's family, it belongs to God. And so I do not favor in 2023 a death penalty, but I do understand where the logic comes from, which is to say that it is not for the victim's family, and it is not for their closure and their comfort. It is a social statement that the worst thing that can ever happen, which makes it forfeit your life, is if you take a life unjustly. And so it is an attempt, the Torah, with all of its death penalties, and there are a lot of them, and in our Parsha this week, this person has blasphemed, and that's why he gets the death penalty. The claim is that there are certain things that you do that are so awful that life loses its value. You've made it impossible for you to live in this society. And I don't think we have to go there, but I also don't think that we can also recognize why people would view that thing. Shofech adam ha'adam, be'adam damo yishafech, ki b'tzelem Elohim barat adam. That's what it says in Genesis 9 in Noah. One who spills shofech dam ba'adam, if you spill human blood, be'adam damo yishafech, your own blood will be spilled by human hands, for the human being is in the image of God, and you've destroyed the image of God. So the only the most extreme punishment is warranted.
I mean, does the phrase Hashem yikom damam, God will avenge their blood, does that offer any kind of solace?
I hate that phrase.
Okay.
I never say
only
that.
if we assume that we're not going to do anything.
Well, I mean,
but it's often used for the opposite.
What don't you like? I'm not,
I think that I don't want to have a bloodthirsty God.
Yeah.
And when God is avenging the blood of victims, in my mind at least, it makes God kind of bloodthirsty.
That's exactly how I feel. Even you'll see after the name of a Holocaust victim, so and so, Hey Yodalet, Hashem Yikom Damam. and certainly after, victims of terror in Israel and stuff, God should, and I feel exactly as Barry said, justice. I mean, the claim that I was just making about the most severe penalty is not a claim of vengeance; it's a claim of justice, and that kind of like, God's going to get you in the end. It doesn't really speak about justice; it speaks about rage, and I just think that that's not a place I want to go religiously.
For the sake of our lovely conversation, I would say that I don't think it at all that it's a bloodthirsty. It's God, taking note of their spilt blood, and the nekama, which is the vengeance, which is we are unable to do that. I mean, there is a great satisfaction in seeing punishment meted out to a perpetrator. God forbid that any of us should ever have to have that experience. But the wrecking of people's lives through murder or other acts of violence calls out for justice. But we have to appeal to the ultimate judge.
Right. So in the human sphere, sorry.
Yeah, no. We're the agents of a human delivery of justice, but we, for our world to have its order, we want God to mete out a punishment to people.
Okay, so I would say two things that I think are important here. First of all, in the human sphere, I've come to appreciate more and more that justice is what we are able to achieve. It's often not satisfactory, but because there are limits. For example, I mean, even if we do use the death penalty, you could only kill a person once, no matter how many people they killed. That's unsatisfactory. But I think that sometimes we're too eager to dismiss what we can get, and therefore we think we have got nothing. But the other thing I would say is that what I find problematic with this phrase about God avenging the victims is that I think sometimes we really have to ask ourselves, who are we to tell God how to run the world? Yeah. I think God can take care of himself. He doesn't need our input here. If they're worthy of him avenging their blood, then God will do that, whether or not I say so. And there needs.
Let me just reinforce that,
please.
If you say Hashem Yikom Damam, and you are in effect saying, show those enemy people no mercy. Hashem El Maleh Rachamim Rachem Aleinu Av HaRachaman HaMarachem Rachem Aleinu. Show us mercy, show us mercy, show us mercy. But not those guys. Show them nothing but the face of justice.
I don't have any problem. God is bigger than that complication.
I want to invoke. I actually, this I think we got something to learn from the Christians, because they want to invoke divine love and mercy even on their enemies. And while I don't, as a Jew, want to totally give up. I mean, you can't hold the rope at both ends, right? If there's justice, then there can't be mercy. There's mercy, there can't be justice. This is a classical religious problem. But I just, the midat hadin, the divine aspect of anger and punishment, it's real, it's necessary, it's important. I don't want to call it down on people. I want to call down the love on people a little more.
Yeah, okay, but then you have to deal with the fact that, a couple of weeks ago, an entire family was destroyed by a murderous terrorist, and saying, okay, so do they want compassion? Of course not. And I know you don't agree with you want them to that terrorist to be put to justice, or whatever happened to him at all. What we've just discovered is how easy it is to talk about these.
Oh man, I mean, because we could. Okay, just a couple of months ago. I mean, this is obviously the hard problem, and this is what we're talking about. What we've been talking about with respect to things in Israel in these recent weeks and months. But I think if you keep saying Hashem Yikom Damam, listen, if you're really good and you say Hashem Yikom Damam, God should take vengeance, and that means I'm going to give this up to heaven, that's great. But this is also a religion in which we are supposed to be Shutafim LaKadosh Baruch Hu, God's partners, and I think the Hawara riots are at least partly a
Motivated by it. I
proactive.
disagree with you, but it's part of a worldview in which that horrible, atrocious, obscenity of an outcome can result and
Right.
and
So
I agree with you. Yeah.
what I would add is that sometimes when we invoke God avenging victims, that it leads people to take God's work into their own hands.
Exactly.
That's
And
the
that
thing.
hardly ever works out well.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, we've reached the end of our time. But
Never.
before we go, we just let's thank everybody for watching, for listening, for being with us, for laughing with us, for agonizing with us, and we honor you, we respect you, we love you, and thank you, and we wish you all Shabbat Shalom, and see you next week.
Shabbat Shalom.
Parasha Talk. Bye-bye.